If you listen closely to the silence of your own room late at night, when the rest of the world has gone to sleep, you can hear a specific kind of quiet. It is the quiet of your own thoughts echoing back at you off the walls. For some, this silence is a relief, a sanctuary from the relentless, screaming demands of modern life. But for others, the quiet is terrifying. It is an empty space where anxiety likes to breed, where overthinking takes root, and where the mind begins to spin wild, chaotic narratives about things we cannot control. Now, take that exact feeling and multiply it by 3,000 miles of open ocean. Imagine standing on the deck of a wooden brigantine in the dead of winter, 1872. The sun has dipped far below the edge of the world, leaving behind a sky so black it feels heavy, as if the darkness itself is pressing down on your chest. In every direction, for hundreds of miles, there is nothing but shifting, restless water. No lights from distant cities, no cell service, no passing ships. Just you, a handful of other human souls, and a fragile shell of oak separating your life from a freezing, bottomless abyss. For over a century and a half, the story of the Mary Celeste has been treated by the world as a thrilling ghost story, a maritime puzzle to be picked apart by treasure hunters, conspiracy theorists, and screenwriters. We argue about sea monsters, pirate raids, mutinies, and cursed cargo. We look at the empty ship as a cold case of crime on the high seas, but we rarely look at the ship as a mirror. We rarely stop to ask what happens to the human psyche when it is pushed to the absolute edge of existential dread. We don't talk about the invisible storms that rage inside a person's mind when isolation becomes a prison. If your mind is feeling fractured, exhausted, or completely overwhelmed by the invisible weights you are carrying today, let's leave the modern noise behind. Let's descend together into the winter of 1872. Today, we aren't just investigating an abandoned ship, we are exploring the anatomy of panic, because the deepest mysteries of the Mary Celeste aren't buried at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. They are hidden within the fragile, beautiful, and sometimes terrifying architecture of the human mind. And as we are about to find out, when panic takes hold, the things we run from are often far safer than the illusions we run toward. Every journey through depression and anxiety begins with a weight, a sense of responsibility that feels just a little too heavy to carry, a creeping suspicion that you are one mistake away from ruining everything. In November of 1872, that weight belonged to a man named Captain Benjamin Briggs. Briggs was not a reckless adventurer. He was a deeply religious, meticulous, and highly experienced mariner from a respected seafaring family in Massachusetts. He was a man of routine, structure, and discipline. But this voyage was different. This voyage carried an entirely unique emotional stake. Captain Briggs was not alone on the Mary Celeste. Packed into the small, cramped cabin beneath the main deck was his 30-year-old wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. To understand the baseline anxiety of this voyage, you must put yourself in Briggs' position. You are the captain of a merchant ship. Your job is inherently dangerous. But now, the people you love most in the universe, your life partner and your baby girl, are sleeping directly on top of a volatile cargo of 1,701 barrels of raw industrial alcohol. Think about the psychological toll of that reality. In modern psychology, we understand the devastating impact of hypervigilance, the state of being constantly on high alert, waiting for a catastrophe that might never happen. It burns out the nervous system. It leaves a person emotionally raw and mentally exhausted. Every time Captain Briggs walked the deck, every time the ship rolled violently in a crosswind, he was acutely aware of the explosive potential buried beneath his feet. Every creak of the hull, every strange scent carried by the wind was a potential alarm, and the weather was not kind. From the moment the Mary Celeste cleared New York Harbor on November 7th, bound for Genoa, Italy, they were battered by a relentless series of brutal Atlantic storms. For 2 weeks straight, the ship was tossed like a toy in slate-gray waves that climbed as high as houses. The decks were perpetually flooded with freezing water. The sails were torn by screaming gale-force winds. Imagine the psychological environment inside that ship. For 14 days, Sarah Briggs and her 2-year-old daughter were confined to a dark, damp, claustrophobic cabin, listening to the thunderous roar of the ocean smashing against the wooden walls. There was no escaping the noise. There was no drying off. Sleep became an impossibility. When a human being is deprived of sleep, subjected to constant physical trauma, and isolated from any hope of rescue, the brain's prefrontal cortex begins to fail. The analytical, logical part of the mind shuts down, and the amygdala, the ancient primal root of fear and survival, takes complete control. You stop seeing reality as it is. You start seeing threats everywhere. You are no longer navigating a ship. You are trapped in a floating echo chamber of your own deepest anxieties. On November 25th, the storm finally broke. The wind died down to a gentle breeze, and the sea settled into a deceptive, glassy calm. But inside the mind of the crew, the storm had likely moved indoors. On that morning, Captain Briggs sat at his desk and wrote the final entry in the ship's log. It was a standard, routine navigational log. No mentions of danger, no cries for help, just coordinates and a timestamp. And then the record stops. For 9 days, the Mary Celeste sailed on in absolute silence, a ghost ship navigating the Atlantic with no one at the wheel. To understand what happened next, we have to look at another ship, the Dei Gratia, a merchant vessel that departed New York 8 days after the Mary Celeste, following a similar route. On December 5th, 1872, the lookout on the Dei Gratia spotted a sail on the horizon. As they drew closer, Captain David Morehouse noticed something profoundly unsettling. The ship was moving erratically, veering wildly with the wind, her sails awkwardly set and fluttering like broken wings. Morehouse hailed the vessel. No answer. Only the lonely cry of seagulls and the slap of waves against the hull. When the boarding crew from the Dei Gratia stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, they walked into a profound, terrifying psychological vacuum. The ship was entirely intact. Her hull was sound. There was plenty of food and water to last for months. The crew's personal belongings, their heavy winter coats, their pipes, their family photographs, the toys of little Sophia, were all neatly packed in their trunks. A sewing machine sat on the table. A vial of machine oil stood upright next to it, undisturbed by the waves. The ship was perfectly capable of sailing across the world, yet the people were gone. Not a single soul remained. When we experience a severe episode of depression or a panic attack, it often feels exactly like stepping onto an abandoned ship. On the outside, to the rest of the world, your life might look perfectly intact. Your house is standing, your job is there, your structure is functional. But on the inside, the captain has fled. The wheel is spinning aimlessly in the wind. The internal crew has evacuated, leaving behind nothing but the quiet, ghostly relics of the life you used to inhabit. The boarding crew noted that the only lifeboat was missing. The main halyard, a thick, heavy rope used to hoist the mainsail, was broken and trailing in the water behind the ship, and the hatches that led down into the dark, volatile cargo hold were wide open. What could cause an experienced, highly disciplined captain to grab his wife, his baby girl, and his crew, abandon a perfectly safe, seaworthy vessel in the middle of the ocean, and climb into a tiny, fragile lifeboat with no food and no water? The traditional answers are material. We look for external culprits. But the real answer lies in the terrifying moment when collective panic breaks through the dam of human reason. The mystery of the Mary Celeste is not a mystery of what smashed the ship from the outside. It is a mystery of what broke the minds of the people on the inside. Panic is a master illusionist. When your nervous system is overwhelmed by prolonged stress, your brain loses the ability to distinguish between a minor inconvenience and a fatal threat. A racing heartbeat becomes a heart attack. A moment of forgetfulness becomes a mental breakdown. A shadow on the wall becomes a monster. On the morning of November 25th, 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs was trapped inside that exact illusion. For weeks, his ship had been slammed by storms. The constant flexing of the wooden hull had caused the timber to expand and contract, allowing seawater to seep into the lower bilges. This was normal for a wooden ship, but the Mary Celeste had an internal problem. She was equipped with a heavy cargo pump that was currently dismantled and out of order. Briggs could not easily measure how much water was pooling in the dark, hidden spaces beneath his feet. At the same time, the temperature of the ocean was shifting as they neared the Azores. Deep within the dark hold, the 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol began to react to the change in temperature. They began to sweat. Industrial alcohol is highly volatile. When it leaks from a barrel, it doesn't just create a liquid mess, it vaporizes. It turns into an invisible, heavy, suffocating gas that expands rapidly inside a sealed, unventilated space. Imagine the moment the crew opened the small hatch to check on the cargo. A blast of chemical, toxic fumes rushes up into their faces. In the dark, damp air of the hold, the fumes look like thick, ominous smoke. The pressure of the gas causes the heavy wooden hatch covers to groan and rattle against their iron locks. To a mind that is already exhausted, sleep-deprived, and hyper-vigilant from weeks of surviving storms, this wasn't just a leak. This was the ultimate nightmare. In video editing, when we want to show a character losing their grip on reality, we distort the lens. We blur the edges of the frame to show that their field of vision has narrowed to a single, terrifying point. That is exactly what panic does to the human brain. Captain Briggs looked down into that dark hold and didn't see a chemical reaction. He saw an imminent explosion. He saw his wife and his 2-year-old daughter being incinerated in a blinding flash of fire in the middle of an empty ocean. He didn't stop to run calculations. He didn't wait to see if the fumes would clear. When the mind is flooded with adrenaline, the instinct to flee overrides chapters of human training, discipline, and protocol. You don't look at the strength of the ship beneath your feet. You only see the danger inside it. What happened next was not an organized evacuation. It was a stampede of the soul. Briggs gave the order to abandon ship, but because he was still an experienced captain, he didn't intend to leave the Mary Celeste forever. He intended to create a psychological buffer zone. He wanted to get his family and crew away from the exploding cargo, wait for the danger to pass, and then climb back aboard once the air was clear. To do this, they lowered the small lifeboat into the water. All 8 crew members, along with Sarah Briggs and little Sophia, squeezed into a boat designed for a fraction of that weight. They didn't pack food. They didn't pack water. They left the logbook on the desk, the navigation instruments in the cabin, and their winter coats hanging on the hooks. They left everything behind because panic tells you that comfort doesn't matter. Survival is the only currency that has value. But they needed a lifeline. They took the thick, heavy main halyard rope, the rope used to hoist the sails, and tied one end to the stern of the Mary Celeste and the other end to the bow of their tiny lifeboat. Think about this image, a massive 280-ton brigantine sailing slowly through the water, towing a tiny, crowded rowboat 400 feet behind it on a single, straining rope. This is the ultimate metaphor for how we try to manage our own mental health crises. When we are overwhelmed by trauma or anxiety, we try to distance ourselves from our lives. We step away from our responsibilities, our routines, and our structures because they feel too dangerous, too toxic, or too explosive to handle. But we don't want to let go completely. We tie ourselves to our past with a fragile lifeline of hope, dragging our heavy histories behind us in the dark, hoping that eventually the air will clear and we can go back home. For a few hours, the plan worked. The lifeboat bobbed in the wake of the Mary Celeste, safe from the imaginary explosion. They watched the great ship sail on, silent and intact. The cargo did not detonate. The smoke did not rise. The illusion of danger began to fade, replaced by a cold, terrifying reality. They were stuck in a tiny wooden box in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, drenched in freezing spray, with a 2-year-old child screaming in the wind. And then, the wind changed. A sudden, sharp squall blew in from the north. The sails of the Mary Celeste, left untended and full of air, caught the wind. The massive ship suddenly surged forward with immense force, like a wild horse breaking from its tether. The 400-foot rope holding the lifeboat snapped taut. For a split second, the tiny boat was dragged violently through the water, its bow dipping below the freezing waves. And then, with a sharp, cannon-like report that echoed across the empty ocean, the main halyards snapped. Let yourself feel the absolute terror of that single second. The rope breaks. The lifeline is gone. The Mary Celeste doesn't stop. She has no one at the helm to turn her around. Guided only by the wind, she glides forward, her great white sails catching the light, moving faster and faster away from the people who had built her. Imagine standing in that tiny rowboat, watching your home, your food, your water, and your only chance of survival sail away from you into the gray mist. You shout, but your voice is swallowed by the roar of the Atlantic. You row, but your tiny oars are useless against the current of the ocean. Within minutes, the Mary Celeste becomes a tiny white dot on the horizon, and then she disappears completely. This is the catastrophic climax of a panic spiral. When we allow fear to dictate our choices, we often abandon the very structures that are keeping us safe. And when the lifeline snaps, when we find ourselves completely disconnected from our support systems, our routines, and our identities, the isolation becomes absolute. You are no longer dealing with an imaginary threat. You are dealing with the real, crushing despair of being lost at sea. When the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded the ship 9 days later, they found the broken rope trailing in the water. They found the open hatches. They found the upright oil vial on the table. They found everything they needed to survive, except the people who had given up everything to run away. The ocean does not keep records of our tears. It doesn't care about our intentions, our fears, or the weight of the responsibilities we carry. When the small lifeboat of the Mary Celeste was left behind in the wake of the great ship, it was swallowed by the vast, indifferent geography of the Atlantic. No trace of Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, little Sophia, or the 7 crew members was ever found. They vanished into the blue vault of the world, leaving behind only questions. But the ship survived. When the men of the Dei Gratia took the wheel of the Mary Celeste, they didn't find a broken hull. They didn't find a haunted curse. They pumped out the minor seawater in the bilge, reset the sails, and easily steered her into the port of Gibraltar. The ship was perfectly fine. The cargo of alcohol was entirely intact. When they unsealed the hold, they found that while a few barrels had leaked, there was no fire, no explosion, and no permanent damage. The tragedy of the Mary Celeste is not that the ship was destroyed. The tragedy is that it was not destroyed. The people died running from a ghost. They sacrificed their lives to escape a catastrophe that existed entirely inside the exhausted, overstimulated, and terrified chambers of their own minds. In our production layouts, when we want to create a sense of resolution, we bring the viewer back to the center. We return to the safe zone, the place where the grid lines meet, where everything is balanced and aligned. We do this because the human brain needs to know that despite the chaos on the edges of the frame, there is a stable core that cannot be broken. Your mind is a ship. It is built to sail through storms. It is engineered with thick timber, strong sails, and a functional keel designed to take the impact of the heaviest waves the world can throw at you. But when anxiety and depression take the wheel, they try to convince you that your ship is failing. They whisper that the cargo is about to explode, that the water is rising too fast, and that your only option is to jump into the dark and abandon everything you've built. They are lying to you. For decades after the incident, the maritime world looked at the Mary Celeste as a failure of captaincy, a black mark on the record of Benjamin Briggs. They held salvage hearings, suspected foul play, and even accused the crew of the Dei Gratia of a massive conspiracy. They look for someone to blame because humanity hates to admit that we can be defeated by our own internal architecture. But in recent years, modern oceanographers and maritime historians have uncovered a different blueprint. They looked at the weather data from November 1872, the structural design of the ship's internal holding tanks, and the chemical properties of industrial alcohol. They realized that Briggs was facing an unprecedented combination of invisible factors: a faulty coal dust clogged pump from a recent refit, a sudden barometric drop, and a cargo that was literally changing state in the dark. He didn't abandon his ship because he was a coward or a fool. He abandoned his ship because he was a father and a husband who was operating with incomplete information in an environment of total isolation. When we look back at our own past mental health crises, the moments where we panicked, where we pushed people away, where we abandoned our goals, or where we let depression drop our lifelines, it is very easy to judge ourselves harshly. We look back from the safety of the shore and say, "Why did I run? Why did I let fear win? Why was I so weak?" But that judgment is a distortion. You were operating in a storm. You were sleep-deprived, emotionally exhausted, and carrying a cargo of stress that felt like it was about to incinerate your entire world. You made choices based on survival, not logic. The ultimate lesson of the Mary Celeste is that the ship survived because of its design, not its crew. Long after the humans had fled in panic, the wooden hull kept floating. It kept tracking straight. It braved the rest of the Atlantic winds entirely on its own, stable and unbroken, waiting for someone to come back and take the wheel. Your resilience is not a conscious choice you have to manufacture every morning. Your resilience is built into your design. Your body, your mind, your spirit, they are engineered to survive. Even when you feel completely disconnected from your own identity, even when you feel like you've abandoned ship and are bobbing aimlessly in a tiny lifeboat of despair, your core structure is still floating in the center of the safe zone. It is waiting for the air to clear. It is waiting for the panic to pass. It is waiting for you to come home. For decades after the incident, the maritime world looked at the Mary Celeste as a failure of captaincy, a black mark on the record of Benjamin Briggs. They held salvage hearings, suspected foul play, and even accused the crew of the Dei Gratia of a massive conspiracy. They look for someone to blame because humanity hates to admit that we can be defeated by our own internal architecture. But in recent years, modern oceanographers and maritime historians have uncovered a different blueprint. They looked at the weather data from November 1872, the structural design of the ship's internal holding tanks, and the chemical properties of industrial alcohol. They realized that Briggs was facing an unprecedented combination of invisible factors: a faulty coal dust clogged pump from a recent refit, a sudden barometric drop, and a cargo that was literally changing state in the dark. He didn't abandon his ship because he was a coward or a fool. He abandoned his ship because he was a father and a husband who was operating with incomplete information in an environment of total isolation. When we look back at our own past mental health crises, the moments where we panicked, where we pushed people away, where we abandoned our goals, or where we let depression drop our lifelines, it is very easy to judge ourselves harshly. We look back from the safety of the shore and say, "Why did I run? Why did I let fear win? Why was I so weak?" But that judgment is a distortion. You were operating in a storm. You were sleep-deprived, emotionally exhausted, and carrying a cargo of stress that felt like it was about to incinerate your entire world. You made choices based on survival, not logic. The ultimate lesson of the Mary Celeste is that the ship survived because of its design, not its crew. Long after the humans had fled in panic, the wooden hull kept floating. It kept tracking straight. It braved the rest of the Atlantic winds entirely on its own, stable and unbroken, waiting for someone to come back and take the wheel. Your resilience is not a conscious choice you have to manufacture every morning. Your resilience is built into your design. Your body, your mind, your spirit, they are engineered to survive. Even when you feel completely disconnected from your own identity, even when you feel like you've abandoned ship and are bobbing aimlessly in a tiny lifeboat of despair, your core structure is still floating in the center of the safe zone. It is waiting for the air to clear. It is waiting for the panic to pass. It is waiting for you to come home. History is not a collection of dead dates and forgotten ghosts. History is an archive of human emotion. It is a map of how those who came before us fought the exact same invisible monsters we face every single day. Captain Benjamin Briggs and his family were lost to the sea, but their story remains as an eternal signpost for the rest of us. It stands as a reminder that when the storms of life arrive, the safest place you can possibly be is inside your own vessel. Don't let panic convince you to cut your lifelines. Don't let anxiety tell you that your cargo is too explosive to carry. Trust your timber, trust your design. Hold the wheel, even when your hands are freezing and the horizon is completely dark. The vaults of history are full of secrets, but the greatest secret of all is that humanity has an infinite capacity to endure. No matter how deep the ocean beneath you feels, you are not alone in the dark. The same human heart that navigated the winter of 1872 is beating inside your chest right now. Thank you for entering the vault with me again tonight, to step away from the chaos and decompress your mind. If these journeys into the deep mysteries of the past help you find a sense of calm and perspective in your own life, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Let this space be your weekly sanctuary, a late-night lounge where we turn off the modern noise, look past the wrong clues, and decode the timeless truths of human survival. Protect your peace, look after your inner crew, and join us right back here for a brand new investigation inside the vault every Thursday. Until our next voyage, keep your heading true and stay grounded.